Sure. I don't know what everybody's waiting for. I don't know what everybody's talking about.
Well, serious people, one and all, none other than Senator Hollie Hughes, future Senator, but till now, Sky Hughes and Caroline Marcus. And, well, he's working on that upper house spot in the Victorian Parliament before eventually moving to the federal Parliament. Future Prime Minister, Governor-General, President of Australia, emissary to the Pope, whatever job for services to talking points. The Lord Mayor, the Deputy Lord Mayor of Melbourne, none other than Nicholas Reece. So, Hollie, let's start with you. Cost of living crisis. Apparently, the best thing is that $1,500 tax increases is what 10 million people need to pay, and apparently it's a tough decision for the federal government. And even Stephen Jones, the Assistant Treasurer, had the balls to pretend this has something to do with inflation. The best way to fight inflation is for us to keep your money.
It does seem that way, but I think what's really underhanded here is the fact that they announced this as we were going into the Easter weekend. And it seems like something you would do if you wanted to deliberately bury something.
That's how you bury it.
Just as everyone's going off.
Good Friday drop,
days,
Saturday paper.
Few days off with the kids. I was at the beach. I certainly was not tracking everything that was going on for a couple of days. Come on, Nick, I can hear you scoffing in there. But you
he
know,
knows the dark arts. He knows that any of the, this is why you got to work on Easter Sunday, Easter Mondays, because we're watching it all. This is how they do it, Nicholas, be honest. If you wanted to roll out a tax increase on 10 million people, you'd do it over the Easter weekend, wouldn't you?
Oh, look, there's no secret about this. I mean, let's not forget, Josh Frydenberg and Jim Chalmers both went to the last election saying that if either of them were elected, returned to government or new government elected, then this tax offset was going to be removed. And there was a pretty good reason for that. It's because Australia's government has racked up $1 trillion in debt and now have just purchased $368 billion in submarines, and it's got to be paid for somehow, and that's
submarine tax.
Involve some
well,
sacrifice. But
I'm sure the 11
submarine tax. But I love that, of course. They are wedded to every policy, every promise they made before the election. This government has kept every single word of it. And the Liberal Party, they were well and truly going to lock this in as well after the next election. Caroline, 10 million people are about to have a tax increase. The press gallery and one of its chiefs, doyens and people that roll their eyes when I walk down the corridor come budget time is quoting, "Yes, Minister," quoting Oscar Wilde.
I like Charles Croucher, but what...
So do I. I don't dislike him, but come on. 10 million people are getting a tax increase.
I know, this is not hitting the big end of town. This is middle Australia. This is people on incomes of $50,000 a year or less who are really going to feel the pinch. And what happened to these promises to ease cost of living for people? I mean, this is the equivalent of 2 Reserve Bank interest rate hikes. And look, we knew it was going to come. We knew in the budget that they weren't going to keep going with it, and you know, both sides, both parties said that they were going to cut this. But then why do it now? Every newsroom knows that if you want to hide something or bury it, you do it over a period like this.
If the government had been returned, you would have heard me screaming for this to be kept for at least another 12 months, all right? And clearly there would have been more friendly ears that would have been listening to it. But Hollie, again, it's $1,500, it's 10 million people. Talk about priorities. Now I get it, we'll talk about Julie and Lisa in a second, right? Because it's part of the day. But when people actually wake up from their Easter break and they realise this is happening, they were sold a pup from everyone at the last election, but certainly this is a mistake. This shouldn't be happening.
Well, and at the end of the line, it's going to save $11 billion. That's not really going to make much difference when you look at $125 billion of extra
spending buy us a steering wheel on those submarines.
The government. And what Labor don't seem to want to acknowledge is this is actually their second budget in May. They don't want to talk about their October budget. They still keep harping back to coalition governments. This is actually their budget now. They have a budget out there. They're having another one in May, and they have to own this. So it's cold comfort to those Australians who are going to be $1,500 off that this government, they can't even say the number $275 of what they were.
Remember those ironclad promises again, but I thought every promise had to be absolutely delivered. Please, Nick, dig up.
Well, can I put a dangerous idea out there? Because I actually agree with the panel that as far as tax breaks go or tax offsets go, this is a pretty good one. It's targeted to low income and middle income Australia, 10 million people who could use a helping hand. So what about if we keep this tax offset,
Here we go.
but we pay for it by getting rid of or not proceeding with the
Here we go, stage 3.
There you go.
Which go to Top of town, high-income earners are the biggest beneficiaries. So why don't we keep the tax offset, but comes at the expense of not proceeding with those
Nick,
tax-free...
have you just let the cat out of the bag?
What do you reckon, Hollie? Can we do the deal tonight?
Have you just let the cat out of the bag? We know that this Labor government promised before the election they were committed. They voted for the stage 3 tax cuts.
Every promise.
They are asked the question repeatedly in the Senate by the Greens, and they are committing every day. So unless I think they should absolutely stay. They are something that have been legislated. Every day.
If you want a horse trade, Nick, let's go through the budget and find $11 billion worth of spending you'd like to cut off. More than happy to help you.
We can find a whole lot of things, Nick.
Yeah, all right, let's get on to other stuff.
Well, hang on. Hollie was elected. Hollie was elected on a commitment to get rid of this tax offset. Is she now saying that she thinks it should stay?
I was actually elected the time before, but I do actually think if the coalition government had been returned, we would have kept this tax offset. Correct. I think Lamido would have absolutely stayed because we know the impact that it was having. And then you'd still proceed
with the stage 3 tax cut?
Absolutely, they're legislated because, Nick, unlike you, we actually believe...
That's how you rack up a
Well, Nick, I think Australians are better spending their money than the government.
You just pretend money's not real and you just keep cutting taxes
the Labor Party, when they run out of their money, they cut Mate, you want to go through some of the costs that you guys are blowing out?
Hang on. But
you
also...
just killed industry with your safeguard mechanism. Industry will be over. You are deindustrialising our nation. Yeah. You are making us more insecure when it comes to long-term investment. And so what are you doing?
We don't make copy paper anymore.
Low and medium income earners, and you're hitting those income earners who are hitting higher tax breaks because of income increases, as we've seen with bracket creep. Nick, that's what happens. It's simplifying.
But also, let's just be, let's be clear here about spending. Right, the government is about to spend more money than it has ever spent in its history. Whole series of things. They don't have a revenue problem; they've got a spending problem. Again, if you think, and anyone in politics, even the people that advocated in both sides of the parliament, that a $1,500 tax increase is what 10 million people want because it's good for them, good luck. Anyway, surprise, surprise, they didn't talk much about it. Now, let's talk about the, again, thawing in relations and, again, the good decision, which is that these tariffs are going to come off barley. Here's Penny Wong taking a victory lap.
The reason we are going down this path is because the Australian government wants to see these impediments, these tariffs lifted as soon as possible. If this is successful, this is a template for the resolution for wine that we would be advocating to the Chinese government.
So, Caroline, what I'm fascinated here is that, again, of all the things we can criticise this government about, you can't really heap too much into them about China. They've been solid eventually on TikTok, solid eventually on AUKUS, solid eventually on pulling out those security cameras, which should have gone a long time ago. So the only difference between this government asking for the tariffs to be removed and the last government is the fact that the government changed and Beijing has sent a message to everyone in Canberra, screw with us and we'll move 1.2 million votes against you.
Yeah, look, I think it has more to do. I think we're giving the government too much credit for this anyway, because this is part of China's new policy to act a little bit more cuddly and less threatening. Exactly, a little bit more koala. So I don't know. I think it's good timing, and for them, let's look at this critically. They were facing a judgment from the WTO about this, and then they could have delayed and they could have said, okay, it'll be another year. Who knows what's going to come out of this 3 or 4 month review? So I'm hesitant when it comes to anything with China. They can change their mind in a minute. Next week it could be something else. I think it's more a case of good timing.
And don't forget, at the World Trade Organization, China is a developing country. You know, like all those developing countries in Africa that have a space station. Nicholas, again, I give credit to this government for not giving in to China in the fashion that many of us were afraid of before the election. So isn't the reality here that China will achieve what it wanted to, which was to remind the Australian political world, push us too far and we'll tell people to vote against you?
So, look, I laughed out loud when I heard that in your editorial, Paul. I'm sorry to say, the idea that the Chinese government is trying to, deliberately manipulate how Chinese people in Australia will vote, or more to the point that they would respond to that is outrageous. Australians living in this country of Chinese cultural background will vote the way they see fit based on, their interests, the interests of their country, Australia, and their family interests. They're not taking direction from China. I mean, the fact is that
my
Australia
suggestion is
and
what's
China
coming from Beijing,
have...
not what people are doing. You know that. And here, Labor is in this lovely sweet spot now where they have become the political beneficiaries of 1.2 million people who, as I pointed out multiple times before, voted Liberal, 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 and then voted Labor. Geez, what changed?
Well, I mean, the reason why these tariffs are coming off now is because it's in the interests of both countries for them to be lifted. The Chinese were angry because they felt that the Morrison government used to keep deliberately poking them in the eye, and so we got ourselves into a trade war.
Anyone asked
and
a question.
At some stage, Chinese people do want to enjoy lobsters at a good price, great Aussie barley. Of course, they need our
just as long as you don't talk about a global
students love
pandemic.
Coming here to study, and so at some point it's in the Chinese interest to go, okay, let's move on. And of course,
don't mention the virus war. Is that the thing now?
We move on. I mean, Australia and China last 30 years have enjoyed one of the greatest economic runs in human history, and we've both become prosperous together. And I think it's in both countries' interest to see that continue.
I always love the logic of the left here, Hollie, which is we should lead the world in climate change, but we should just sit back when it comes to China.
Well, I mean, it's what China wants, I think, more than anything. When we look at what they need for their own economy, what they need when it comes to our coal, when it comes to our iron ore, all of these things, I think, to read anything more into it, that it's in China's interest to behave this way, absolutely. And I think you're spot on. If anyone dare raise the question around the pandemic again and pointed the finger at Wuhan, I think that frostiness might resettle very quickly.
Dare mention those domestic flights that were stopped, but the international ones that kept going. I mean, nothing to see. It's only a few million people that are dead quick. We've all moved on from that, haven't we? We're all eating we're al fresco dining now.
And I'm sorry,
the Grand Prix's on again.
The idea that it's laugh out loud funny that China would want to have anything to do with our own elections or political powers. I mean, wasn't it New South Wales Labor that was taking bags of cash from Chinese
Aldi
donors?
bags.
Like, I think they do want a little bit of say over what happens here.
Well, all I say is look at the reporting, particularly of the Channel 9 newspapers, in and around the politicisation of the localised Chinese media, which is part of the information that people are getting in this country.
Well,
That's what I'm saying.
I guess it's a bit different for Nick, though, as well, because they do have Dan, who has such a good relationship with China, and Belt and Roads is all the way in Victoria.
Well, it's a partnership. It's a partnership. It's all about friendship.